Okie dokie, we've made it. Welcome to the final 2022 NHL Draft recap. Today we are looking at the St. Louis Blues, and we have made it to the end. The St. Louis Blues were and have been an interesting team to watch draft over the last little while. I think this year went okay. They started with Jimmy Snuggerud, who I had ranked 33rd, and as I was watching guys leading up into the draft, he's the one who moved up my board the most relative to where I had him just before the draft. Snuggerud is a player that brings a really nice, well-rounded game in terms of his skill level and the intensity that he brings. The shot quality that he has and his pre-shot skill is really, really good. He's one of the worst puck distributors that I've ever tracked, I think, in terms of completing passes and pass volumes and everything. But in terms of offensive zone generation, shots, and playmaking there's some decent volume. I want to see him get inside the middle of the ice a little bit more, get to higher danger scoring areas more often. But he's a really great shooting threat to have around the offensive zone and has a bit of a physical edge to him as well. So a nice, well-rounded package for the St. Louis Blues to work with. Alex Ontari Koskembaki at 73. I was never a fan over the course of the whole year. He's a guy who knows how to get to scoring areas. He's a no-nonsense offensive guy with some okay skill here and there. But I wasn't really blown away with his game. At 73rd overall, I think there were other players I would have targeted, but, it's right where he was ranked on average. I certainly didn't see a player that lined up with the production that I was seeing. So we'll see what happens with him. And I watched him in the Liga a little bit this year. He just felt like he was falling behind too much. Processing play wasn't great. Navigating through pressure wasn't great. Just a lot of long-term projects to work on with Koskembaki. At 88, they drafted Michael Buchinder, and similar to Angus Booth, just a guy who I don't think brings a whole lot of value, but can generate points on the power play. He had a really hot start to the year. I never really came away thinking that there was a player that I was super interested in with Buchinder, but we'll see what happens with him. I don't know. It's not over, obviously, but at 88, there were other players I probably would have pushed for ahead of Buchinder. At 120, they took Karamisilov, who is a guy who, again, I wasn't a fan of this year watching him. Watching him and then seeing Gradinin go 34 picks later, both Russian defensemen, it just was very perplexing to me. I liked Karamisilov not this past season, but the year before with the same team with SKA 1946. The skill is there. I think he plays with some good confidence, but we'll see how it goes in terms of projecting past this level because I don't know if I see it. Marc-Andre Gaudette at 152. I actually think that this was one of their more underrated picks of the draft. I like what I've seen of him now that I've seen him post-draft, and I hadn't seen very much before the draft. He's wired to be creative and aggressive. I think he tends to drive offense through his shot more than anything, and some people like that, some people don't. He's got a quick release, and I think he drove okay results all across the board. I think he'll need to be a lot better on his feet in terms of mobility and pushing the pucks around with his feet. And I think he needs a lot more skill to play his brand of play at the next level. And he also produced a lot less at even strength relative to playing on the power play. But I think he's a nice blank slate for an offensive defenseman, even if NHL likelihood is kind of low as it is. And then they took Landon Sim at 184. He's got the advantage of youth, being born in July. He didn't get a ton of ice time, but he did play decent minutes on a pretty good London Knights team. I found he was a hardworking, intense, and physical player, pretty decent release on his wrist shot, and attacked play through traffic. I wonder what kind of role he fills one day in the NHL, though. But he takes smart routes, makes some smart plays in my limited viewings, but I think NHL upside is a little bit limited. But he's got the bloodlines, he's got the youth, he's got the sort of profile of a late round sort of physical swing. So we'll see what happens at 184. So for St. Louis, I think Snuggerud at 23 was pretty high, all things considered, but on the high end of what I would have been comfortable with. There were just other players that I think I was much more interested in that range, but that list was getting shorter and shorter. But Snuggerud is an okay pick, and I think he could be a decent middle six offensive guy that can finish and also play with a bit of a physical edge. The rest of the picks they took, I don't think there's much there. Koskembaki, Buchinder, and Karamisilov, I'm not sure that there's enough real upside potential. It's not impossible based on their style of play, but I feel like there's a long way to go for them. And Gaudette and Sim, nice swings to take in the late rounds, but I think we're closing this one off with a 3C. I liked St. Louis's draft more than Calgary, but I think it was kind of on par. I think they just had more picks than Calgary. And I think teams like Florida and Boston, for teams that had less draft capital, were slightly ahead based on what they had. So with that being said, that's it. We're done. You can look at this leaderboard. I will also post it publicly. But I mean, Seattle, Carolina, Minnesota, Buffalo, and Winnipeg are my top 5 teams from this year's draft. And the bottom 5 are St. Louis, Calgary, LA, Edmonton, and Colorado. But yeah, Seattle gets my MVP draft out of everybody. And the one where I think that they're on the lowest rung here, I think, is Colorado. But they've got the Stanley Cup rings to shut me up. And I think I'd personally rather have some Stanley Cup rings too. So that's it for the Scouching recaps this year. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you watched one or all 32. It was a ton of fun to put them all together. It took a while to get them all done, but I appreciate your patience through all the tech issues that I gave myself. We're going to do one more bonus video, so don't go anywhere. This is going to come out tomorrow, and you'll see what it's about when it goes live. So we'll see you tomorrow for that. And thank you very much for joining me, and it's always a pleasure to put these together for you. I missed doing it last year, but this year, feeling good. So we'll see you next year.